So let's talk a little bit about groups and collections. There comes a time in your workflow that it makes sense to group elements together so that you can treat them as one single object. And you'll notice if we have a look at this file here, we're in grouping start AI, which you can find in the objects and layers folder. Now here I have a little character that I have split into individual layers. And if we have a look at those layers, let me just turn off everything and then turn it on again. There I have my template layer, and then I have all the layers that I've traced on top of that. Now I tend to create these characters for animation, so I want to keep everything on individual layers so that when I import it into Adobe After Effects, I can then go in and animate the individual elements. For example, if I select the right arm here and choose the rotation tool, in After Effects what I can do is animate that arm, making sure I have it selected of course. I can animate that arm to make it look as if he's hammering something into the wall. So that's how I create my animation. So I have everything on layers, which is fine, but within the layers I have lots of objects, and if we have a look at something like the body group, notice that there are lots and lots of different objects that go together to make up that body. Now I drew all of these or created the shapes on a single layer, and that's why they all exist within that single layer. What I'm going to do is just lock everything else, so I'm just going to lock all the other files or all the other layers except for this one. And then we're going to have a look at some of the elements in it. You'll see there are a few elements that make up his tie, for example. Now if I wanted to say adjust his tie a little bit, move it or change the colour or make any other changes to it, it's quite awkward to have to go in there and select individual items. So instead what I can do is select all the items of the tie and group them together. So one way of doing it would be to manually select them, but if I select the tie and go to select same fill colour, it should select all the elements of my tie without me having to go and do it myself. And then I can go to object group. And that's going to group it together. Now it makes sense to rename a group, so I'm double clicking it and calling it tie group. Okay, I would do the same for the shirt. I would click on the path for the shirt, go to select, and I can choose same appearance, same blending mode, fill colour, opacity, stroke colour or weight. There's lots and lots of additional options in here now you can see, including same symbol instance, appearance attributes, so a lot of choices in terms of making selections. So I'm going to choose fill colour again, and I'm going to group the shirt. Now I want you to watch what happens down here. So I'm going to hit Command G or Control G on Windows, and look what happens. It jumps in front of not only the tie but also the belt. Now I'm going to rename that again, shirt group, and I can drag it underneath the tie. Whoops, now I've just dragged it into the tie group, which is something else you can do, but I didn't mean to do that, so I'm going to undo and do it again. But I now need to select the belt and place that above there. So it starts to become a little bit more complicated. Let's just select the jacket before we do the belt. So I'm going to select a jacket item and go to select, same, fill colour. And this time we're going to group it again. Now watch what happens here. I group it, but I lose some of the detail. Now, sometimes there are elements within the jacket that don't have the same fill colour. And that's what's happened there. I've missed some of them out. Now, rather than move through and try and find them, what I'm going to do is just select some of the items that I know and get rid of them first. So I think this is part of the path for the belt. This is part of the belt. This is part of the belt. And I believe that is too. So I know that's the belt, so I'm going to group that together and call it belt group. And by a process of elimination, we start to figure out, okay, what's left? And the only things that are left, so this is part of the shirt group, so I can drag it into my shirt group and it will place it in there. Now it's placed it at the top, so quite often you'll have to go into the shirt group and just move it down the stacking order until it's in the correct place. So there's a certain amount of manual adjustment needs to be made. You can also toggle off visibility, and I can see that needs to go in the shirt group, and that'll be fine on top. Okay, there's another item there for the shirt group. So eventually, just by a process of elimination, you can start to figure out what goes where. I can select all of those, put them inside the shirt group. And we should have a few items left, which should all be part of the jacket. So I'm going to select all of those, put them inside the jacket, and because they jump to the top, we should get our detail back again. So it's relatively straightforward to group everything together into these different elements. Now, the nice thing about that is I want to animate the body in After Effects, but I don't want to animate this jacket separately from the shirt and stuff. So I don't really want to put it on separate layers, and that's why being able to create these groups is quite powerful, because it means that I can have sub-layers, if you like, of the layer. But then when I import it into After Effects, I'm only going to see the body layer. I'm not going to have to be bothered with all the detail inside. But it means that if I want to move the tie a little bit, I can just select it, move it. I could select the shirt group and maybe change the fill colour to a different colour. So it's much, much easier to make selections. Now, you can also make what are called collections. Okay, so a collection is slightly different. So, for example, if I wanted to take all of these parts of the head and make them into a single item, I don't want to choose grouping, because if I group, watch what happens. So I'm going to select the head and all the individual items. Okay. And I'm going to say group. So Command G. It's now called an ear, and it's grouped it all together. So I've actually lost all of that naming that I created on those individual layers. And I don't want to do that. I really want to be able to get access to the ear and the hair separately. So I can just select the hair maybe and move it a little bit or adjust it in some way. So another option, instead of grouping, is to select everything that we want to put in the group or the collection and go to the wing menu of the layers panel and choose, and I've selected the arm, so let me just lock the arm so we're not selecting that. And we choose collect into new layer. And watch what happens. It goes into a new layer again, but within the layer, and I haven't selected all of my items, so I'm just going to undo that. Now, the mistake I made there was I've selected the objects. So by clicking on the target, I'm selecting the objects. In order to use collect, you actually have to select the layers themselves. So just be aware of that. I quite often make that mistake. So for selecting groups, you select the actual objects. For collecting, you actually select the layers. And we'll go to collect into new layer. And now I have a new layer called layer 19, which is fine, I can rename it. But within that, I have my little individual elements that I can go and animate individually, which is fantastic. So I might rename my head group, so we'll call it head group. And in After Effects, I can animate the head around if I want to just select that head layer. And I can have the head nodding or moving in After Effects, which is great. But I have access to all the individual elements within it. Now, I could also maybe group elements within there. Maybe I would group the eyebrows together. So I'd select the two eyebrows and group them. And obviously it moves them onto the same kind of sub-layer. So I would delete this one and just rename this eyebrows group. So there are lots of reasons why you would group things, but the main reason is just to make it easy to make selections and also to keep yourself sane, because having individual objects, you just end up with a massive layers panel, which is quite difficult to control. So this way, by using collections and groups, you can keep your artwork better organised and keep yourself sane.